The message arrives at Combined Fleet Headquarters in the late afternoon of April 7th, 1945. A radio operator's hand trembles as he transcribes the final transmission from the destroyer Fuyuzuki. Admiral Soemu Toyoda, Commander-in-Chief of the Combined Fleet, reads the words he has been expecting but dreading. Yamato has capsized and sunk. The room falls silent. Staff officers stand frozen at their posts. Someone's pencil rolls off a desk and clatters to the floor. No one moves to pick it up. Toyoda's face remains expressionless, but his jaw tightens. He has just received confirmation that the largest battleship ever built, the pride of the Imperial Japanese Navy, the vessel that was supposed to embody Japan's naval supremacy, has been destroyed after barely 4 hours of combat. With her went 2,498 men, including Vice Admiral Seiichi Itto. The commander Toyoda himself ordered on this mission. A mission many in this very room had argued against. A mission Toyoda approved anyway. He sets the message down carefully, as if it might shatter. Then he speaks, his voice steady, but hollow. Inform Imperial General Headquarters. What Japanese High Command said when the Yamato was sunk cannot be separated from what they said before sending her to die. Because unlike most naval disasters, this one was planned, debated, agonized over, and ultimately ordered despite nearly everyone involved knowing it would end exactly as it did. The story begins 3 days earlier, on April 4th, in this same headquarters. Vice Admiral Ryunosuke Kusaka, Toyoda's Chief of Staff, presents the proposal that will become Operation 10-Go. American forces have landed on Okinawa. The island is Japan's last major defensive position before the home islands. The army is fighting desperately, but everyone in this room knows how it will end. The Americans have air superiority, naval superiority, and an endless supply of men and materials. Japan has desperation and the willingness to die. Kusaka's voice is measured as he outlines the plan. The combined fleet will sortie with Yamato as its centerpiece. The force will break through to Okinawa, beach Yamato on the shore, and use her massive 18.1-inch guns as stationary artillery to support the Army's defense. When her ammunition runs out, the crew will join the ground forces. It is, in every sense, a one-way mission. Yamato will receive only enough fuel to reach Okinawa, not to return. The officers around the table understand immediately what this means. They are being asked to order the deliberate destruction of their greatest warship and the certain death of nearly 3,000 men in an operation that has virtually no chance of success. American submarines will spot them the moment they leave port. American carrier aircraft will swarm them long before they reach Okinawa. Even if by some miracle Yamato survives to beach herself, American battleships and aircraft will pound her into scrap within days. Captain Shigenori Kami, a staff officer, speaks first. His voice carries the weight of someone who has done the calculations and found them wanting. This is not a naval operation. This is a suicide mission disguised as strategy. Others nod. The objections pile up. Yamato represents one of the last major naval assets Japan possesses. To throw her away on a symbolic gesture seems not just wasteful but obscene. The fuel alone, in a nation where oil has become more precious than gold, represents a staggering expenditure. That fuel could keep training aircraft flying for weeks, could power smaller vessels for months. And for what? So that Yamato can die spectacularly instead of surviving to defend the home islands? But Kusaka, speaking for Toyoda, presents the counter-argument. The army is dying on Okinawa. Tens of thousands of soldiers fighting and bleeding while the Navy sits in port, husbanding resources for a final battle that may never come. The accusation hangs unspoken in the air. The Navy is hiding while the Army sacrifices everything. If the combined fleet does nothing, the Navy's honor, its very reason for existence, dies with those soldiers. The debate stretches into the evening. Some officers argue for preserving Yamato for the inevitable invasion of Japan itself. Others point out that by the time that invasion comes, American air power will make it impossible for any large warship to operate anyway. Some suggest sending Yamato with a full fuel load and a genuine combat mission. But there is no genuine combat mission that makes sense. The age of the battleship ended years ago. Yamato has become a symbol searching desperately for a purpose. Admiral Toyoda listens to all of it. He is 59 years old, a career naval officer who has watched Japan's maritime power crumble over 4 years of war. He remembers when the combined fleet was the most powerful naval force in the Pacific. Now it consists of a handful of ships, most damaged, all starved for fuel and ammunition. The decision before him is not really about military effectiveness. It is about meaning, about whether the Navy will end its existence with a gesture of defiance or the whimper of irrelevance. Finally, he speaks. The operation will proceed. Prepare the orders. The room erupts in protest. Captain Kami stands, his face flushed. "Sir, we are ordering Admiral Itto to commit suicide. We are ordering 3,000 men to die for nothing." Toyoda's eyes are hard. They will die demonstrating that the combined fleet still fights. That is not nothing. But even as he gives the order, Toyoda knows the critics are right. He is sending Yamato to die because not sending her seems worse, because the alternative is to do nothing while Japan burns. It is a choice between a meaningful death and a meaningless survival, and he has chosen death. He will spend the rest of his life wondering if he chose correctly. The next day, April 5th, the orders reach Vice Admiral Seiichi Itto at Tokuyama. He is 57, a veteran of 35 years in the Navy, and he reads the operation plan with growing disbelief. Then anger. He summons his staff and reads portions aloud, his voice shaking. This is not an operation. This is a death sentence written in naval terminology. Itto's chief of staff, Rear Admiral Nobue Morishita, has already read the orders. His face is gray. They are asking us to beach Yamato and fight his infantry. They are asking the Navy to become the army. The room fills with bitter laughter. The rivalry between Japan's army and navy has defined military politics for decades. Now, at the end, the navy is being ordered to sacrifice itself in the army's battle, using the army's tactics. The irony is almost too bitter to bear. Itto composes a message to Combined Fleet Headquarters. It is carefully worded but unmistakable in its meaning. He requests clarification of the mission objectives. He points out the near certainty of destruction before reaching Okinawa. He notes that Yamato's loss will leave the combined fleet with no capital ships for the defense of Japan itself. He does everything but directly refuse the order. The reply comes within hours. Admiral Toyoda himself has drafted it. The operation will proceed as ordered. The combined fleet must demonstrate its fighting spirit. The sacrifice is necessary. Itto reads this response in his cabin aboard Yamato. For a long moment, he sits motionless. Then he stands, straightens his uniform, and walks to the bridge. He finds Captain Kosaku Ariga, Yamato's commanding officer, staring out at the harbor. Ariga is 51, has commanded Yamato for only 3 months, and now will die with her. We have our orders, Itto says quietly. We sortie tomorrow. Ariga turns. His eyes are red-rimmed. I've already informed the crew. Many have written final letters. That evening, Itto gathers his officers. What he says to them is not recorded in official documents, but survivors remember the essence. He tells them the mission is likely suicide. He tells them they are being sacrificed for symbolic purposes. He tells them that Combined Fleet Headquarters has decided their deaths will mean something, even if their military impact will be negligible. And then he tells them they will do their duty anyway, because they are naval officers, and Japan is dying, and someone must be willing to die with her. Several officers weep openly. Some sit in stunned silence. A few nod with grim acceptance. One young lieutenant, his hands clenched into fists, asks the question everyone is thinking. Sir, are we being murdered by our own command? Itto's answer is careful. We are being asked to demonstrate that the Navy still fights. Whether that is worth 3,000 lives is not for us to decide. That decision has been made. The words satisfy no one, least of all Itto himself. But by morning, Yamato and her escorts are preparing to sortie. The crew moves through their tasks with mechanical precision. Many have left letters to be mailed after their deaths. Some have sent locks of hair home to their families. A few have written bitter words about the mission, about being thrown away, about dying for nothing. These letters will be censored or destroyed. The official narrative cannot include the truth. At Combined Fleet Headquarters, Toyoda and his staff monitor the preparations. They know what they have done. They know they have ordered good men to die in a gesture that will change nothing. But they have also convinced themselves it must be done. The alternative, sitting idle while Japan is invaded, seems worse than any sacrifice. Kusaka, Toyoda's chief of staff, will write after the war about this moment. His words are measured but haunted. We knew it was a suicide mission. We knew the chances of success were nearly zero, but we also knew that if the Navy did nothing, our existence would be meaningless. We chose meaning over survival. Whether that was wisdom or madness, I still cannot say. On April 6th at 3 in the afternoon, Yamato and her escorts depart Tokuyama. The weather is clear. The sea is calm. It is a beautiful day to begin dying. Within hours, American submarines spot the force. The radio messages flash across the Pacific. Task Force 58, the massive American carrier force supporting the Okinawa invasion, begins preparing airstrikes. Admiral Raymond Spruance, commanding the Fifth Fleet, reads the intelligence reports with something close to pity. The Japanese are sending their last battleship on a suicide mission. He will oblige them. At Combined Fleet Headquarters, the staff tracks Yamato's progress through radio reports. They know American submarines have spotted her. They know what comes next. The waiting begins. Toyoda sits at his desk, working through routine paperwork as if this is an ordinary day. But his staff sees him pause frequently, staring at nothing. Once, a junior officer enters to find the Admiral with his head in his hands. Toyoda straightens immediately, his face resuming its mask of command. But for that moment, the weight of what he has ordered is visible. The night passes. Yamato sails south through the Bungo Strait and into the Philippine Sea. Aboard the battleship, the crew is quiet. Many cannot sleep. They know American submarines are shadowing them. They know tomorrow will bring aircraft. They know they are sailing toward their deaths. Vice Admiral Itto spends the night on the bridge. He writes a final letter to his wife, though he knows she will receive it only after his death. The letter is formal, restrained, speaking of duty and honor. It does not mention that he believes this mission is a waste. It does not mention his anger at being ordered to die for symbolism. It speaks only of serving the Emperor and protecting Japan. The lies we tell our loved ones to spare them are bitterness. April 7th dawns clear and bright. The sea is rough, whitecaps breaking across Yamato's massive bow. At Combined Fleet Headquarters, the morning briefing is subdued. Everyone knows today is the day. The staff moves through their routines, but the tension is palpable. Officers speak in hushed voices. The radio room is crowded with men waiting for news they dread. At 12:30 in the afternoon, the first American aircraft appear. They are Hellcats and Avengers from Task Force 58, nearly 400 aircraft in total. They circle Yamato like sharks, waiting for the full strike force to assemble. Aboard the battleship, the crew watches them gather. Some men pray, some weep, some simply stare, faces blank with the knowledge of what comes next. The attack begins at 12:32. The first wave comes from the port side, torpedoes and bombs falling in a carefully coordinated assault. Yamato's anti-aircraft guns fill the sky with fire, but there are too many aircraft. The first torpedo strikes amidships, then another. Then a bomb penetrates the deck and explodes deep inside the ship. At Combined Fleet Headquarters, the radio messages begin arriving. Under heavy air attack. Then, minutes later, multiple torpedo hits. Then, heavy damage, listing to port. Toyoda reads each message as it arrives. His face remains expressionless, but his hands grip the edge of his desk. Around him, staff officers stand frozen, listening to the death of their fleet's pride transmitted in terse radio bursts. The attack continues for nearly 2 hours. Wave after wave of aircraft. Torpedo after torpedo slamming into Yamato's hull. Bombs crashing through her decks. The great battleship, designed to withstand punishment from enemy battleships, is being torn apart by aircraft she cannot effectively fight. At 1:40 in the afternoon, a message arrives from Yamato. Listing 14 degrees. Steering lost. Flooding cannot be controlled. Kusaka, reading over Toyoda's shoulder, closes his eyes. She's dying. Toyoda says nothing. He picks up a pen and begins writing notes for the report he will have to submit to Imperial General Headquarters. His handwriting is precise, controlled. Only the slight tremor in his fingers betrays his emotion. At 2:05, another message. Listing 20 degrees. Abandoning ship ordered for non-essential personnel. The radio room at Combined Fleet Headquarters is now packed with officers. No one speaks. They simply listen to the radio operator read each message aloud in a flat, emotionless voice. The death of Yamato narrated in real time. At 2:20, the final message begins transmitting. The radio operator at headquarters transcribes frantically. Listing 35 degrees. Cannot be controlled. Yamato will... The transmission cuts off. Static fills the radio room. The operator adjusts his equipment, trying to re-establish contact. Nothing. Just the hiss of empty frequencies. 3 minutes later, a message from the destroyer. Fuyuzuki confirms what everyone already knows. Yamato has capsized and sunk. Position 30 degrees 22 minutes north, 128 degrees 4 minutes east. Time, 14:23. The radio operator's voice breaks as he reads the position. Someone in the back of the room makes a sound that might be a sob. Toyoda sits motionless, staring at the message. 2,498 men have just died on his order. The largest battleship ever built has been destroyed after less than 2 years of active service. The combined fleet, for all practical purposes, no longer exists. For a long moment, no one moves. Then Toyoda stands. His voice, when he speaks, is steady but hollow. Inform Imperial General Headquarters. Yamato has been sunk. Vice Admiral Itto is presumed lost with his ship. He pauses, then adds, the crew of Yamato fought with distinction and honor. Their sacrifice will be remembered. The words sound empty even as he speaks them. What does fought with distinction mean when you ordered men into a battle they could not win? What does sacrifice will be remembered mean when the sacrifice achieved nothing? But these are the words command requires. These are the lies that make unbearable decisions bearable. Kusaka approaches Toyoda after the room clears. The two men stand in silence for a moment. Then Kusaka speaks quietly. Was it worth it? Toyoda's answer comes slowly. The army is dying on Okinawa. We had to show we were still fighting. We had to show we would sacrifice everything. We sacrificed 3,000 men for symbolism. We sacrificed 3,000 men so the Navy would not end its existence in disgrace. Kusaka looks at his commander. And did we succeed? Toyoda has no answer. He turns away, staring out the window at the harbor where Yamato departed 3 days ago. I will spend the rest of my life wondering. The official report to Imperial General Headquarters is drafted that evening. It is a masterpiece of bureaucratic language, transforming a disaster into a heroic sacrifice. Yamato sortied to attack enemy forces at Okinawa. She was engaged by overwhelming enemy air power. She fought valiantly. Her crew demonstrated the highest traditions of the Imperial Japanese Navy. Vice Admiral Itto and Captain Ariga died as warriors. The mission, while unsuccessful, showed Japan's determination to fight to the end. The report does not mention that the mission was designed as a suicide operation from the start. It does not mention the objections raised before the sortie. It does not mention that Yamato was sent with insufficient fuel to return. It does not mention that nearly everyone involved knew the mission would end in disaster. These truths are not for official reports, but in private conversations, in letters written but never sent, in diaries that will be discovered decades later, the truth emerges. The officers at Combined Fleet Headquarters were devastated. Some wept openly when the news arrived. Others sat in stunned silence. A few became angry, questioning why the order was given, why good men were thrown away. Captain Kami, who had argued against the mission from the start, is found that evening sitting alone in a conference room, staring at a map of Okinawa. When a colleague asks if he is all right, Kami responds with bitter precision. "We murdered them, we ordered them to die for nothing, and we called it strategy." His colleague, uncomfortable with such naked honesty, tries to defend the decision. It was necessary. The Navy had to act. Kami's laugh is harsh. Necessary for what? Yamato is gone. Itto is dead. 3,000 men are at the bottom of the ocean, and Okinawa will still fall. What did we accomplish except the destruction of our own fleet? The colleague has no answer. He leaves Kami alone with his grief and guilt. In the weeks that follow, the impact of Yamato's loss reverberates through Japanese command. The combined fleet, already reduced to a shadow of its former power, is now essentially finished as a fighting force. The few remaining major warships are trapped in port by lack of fuel and the overwhelming American air superiority. The Navy, which began the war with dreams of Pacific domination, ends it unable to defend even Japan's home waters. Admiral Toyoda continues his duties, but those who work with him notice the change. He speaks less. He sits for long periods staring at nothing. When asked about Yamato, he gives the official line about heroic sacrifice and warrior spirit. But in unguarded moments, the mask slips. Once, when a staff officer mentions the battleship in passing, Toyoda's hand trembles so badly he has to set down his teacup. Kusaka, his chief of staff, will later write extensively about this period. His memoirs are careful, measured, but the guilt seeps through every page. We convinced ourselves that Yamato's sacrifice was necessary. We told ourselves that the Navy's honor required action, even suicidal action. We believed that dying spectacularly was better than surviving in irrelevance. Whether we were right or simply desperate men making desperate choices, I cannot say. But I know that Admiral Toyoda never forgave himself, and neither did I. The families of the dead receive the standard notifications: heroic death in battle, service to the Emperor, honor to the family. The letters are identical, impersonal, offering no real comfort. Many families later learn the truth, that their sons and husbands were sent on a suicide mission, that their deaths accomplished nothing. Some accept this with stoic resignation. Others become bitter, questioning why their loved ones had to die. One mother, whose only son died aboard Yamato, writes a letter to Combined Fleet Headquarters. It is angry, raw, demanding to know why her son was sent to die. The letter is intercepted, never reaches Toyoda, is filed away and forgotten. But decades later, when the archives are opened, it is discovered. Her words cut through the official narrative like a knife. "You murdered my son. You called it honor and duty, but you murdered him. And for what? Tell me for what?" No one ever answered her. In the immediate aftermath, Japanese propaganda tries to spin Yamato's loss as a heroic last stand. Radio broadcasts speak of the battleship's valiant fight against overwhelming odds. Newspapers print stories of the crew's bravery. The narrative is clear. Yamato died as a warrior should, fighting to the end. But the Japanese public is not fooled. By April 1945, most civilians understand the war is lost. The destruction of Yamato is seen not as heroic sacrifice, but as confirmation of Japan's desperation. When the news spreads through Tokyo, the reaction is not pride, but despair. The greatest battleship ever built, destroyed in a single afternoon. If Yamato could not survive, what hope does Japan have? At Combined Fleet Headquarters, the staff begins planning for the inevitable. With no fleet to command, their role becomes increasingly administrative. They coordinate the few remaining naval assets, mostly submarines and small craft. They prepare for the defense of the home islands, though everyone knows such defense is futile. They wait for the end. Toyoda, in his private moments, returns again and again to the decision to send Yamato. He reviews the arguments made for and against. He examines his reasoning. He tries to determine if there was an alternative he missed, but always he comes back to the same conclusion. There were no good choices, only degrees of bad. He chose the bad choice that seemed to offer meaning. Whether that was leadership or failure, he cannot decide. In May, as the battle for Okinawa grinds toward its inevitable conclusion, Toyoda receives a letter from a survivor of Yamato's crew. The man, a young ensign pulled from the water by a destroyer, writes to thank the Admiral for the opportunity to serve. The letter is formal, proper, expressing gratitude for the chance to fight for Japan. It is exactly the sort of letter command expects. But tucked inside is a second letter, unofficial, asking that it not be shared. In this letter, the ensign describes the reality of Yamato's final hours. The terror as the torpedoes struck, the chaos as the ship listed, the screams of men trapped below decks as the water rose, the sight of Vice Admiral Itto standing calmly on the bridge as the ship capsized, choosing to die with his command rather than swim for safety. The ensign describes swimming through oil-slicked water, watching Yamato's hull roll over, seeing men sliding off the deck into the sea. He describes being pulled aboard a destroyer and looking back to see the battleship's massive propellers rising into the air before she plunged beneath the waves. And then the ensign writes something that haunts Toyoda for the rest of his life. "Sir, we knew it was a suicide mission. We knew we were being sent to die. We did our duty because we are sailors and we follow orders. But I want you to know that we understood. We understood that our deaths would change nothing. We understood that we were being sacrificed for symbolism, and we went anyway, because that is what sailors do. I hope our deaths meant something to you, sir, because they meant everything to us." Toyoda reads this letter alone in his office. When his aide enters an hour later, he finds the Admiral sitting motionless, the letter on his desk, tears running down his face. It is the only time anyone sees Toyoda cry. The war ends in August. Japan surrenders. The combined fleet, what little remains of it, is dissolved. Toyoda is arrested by American occupation forces, investigated for war crimes, and eventually released. He lives until 1957, working quietly in the Japanese shipping industry, rarely speaking about the war. But those who knew him say he was never the same after Yamato, that he carried the weight of that decision for the rest of his life, that in his final years he would sometimes wake in the night, his wife finding him sitting in the dark, staring at nothing. When she asked what was wrong, he would say only, "I am thinking about the men I sent to die." Kusaka, his chief of staff, survives the war and writes extensively about the decision to send Yamato. His writings are careful, analytical, examining the strategic and political factors that led to Operation Tengu. But beneath the analysis is a current of guilt and doubt. He never quite answers the question of whether the sacrifice was justified. He simply presents the factors, the arguments, the decision, and leaves the judgment to history. History has not been kind. Most scholars view Operation 10 Go as a pointless waste, the destruction of a valuable asset for no military gain. The mission accomplished nothing. Yamato never reached Okinawa. Her sacrifice did not slow the American advance. Her death did not inspire the Japanese public or boost morale. It was simply a grand gesture, a symbolic act by men who confused symbolism with strategy. But some historians offer a more nuanced view. They argue that by April 1945, Japan had no good options. The war was lost. The only question was how to end it. In that context, Operation 10 Go can be seen as an attempt to give meaning to the Navy's final act, to ensure that when Japan surrendered, no one could say the Navy had simply hidden in port, refusing to fight. Whether that justifies the sacrifice of 3,000 lives is a question each person must answer for themselves. What Japanese High Command said when Yamato was sunk was, on the surface, what command always says: heroic sacrifice, warrior spirit, honor, and duty. The official narrative was carefully constructed to transform disaster into legend. But what they said in private, in unguarded moments, in letters and diaries, and late-night conversations, was different. They said they had murdered their own men. They said they had thrown away the fleet's pride for symbolism. They said they had made a choice between meaningless survival and meaningful death, and they were not sure they chose correctly. They said they would carry the weight of that decision for the rest of their lives. And they did. Every one of them. Until the day they died. The final word belongs to Vice Admiral Itto, who never lived to speak it himself, but survivors remember his last words before Yamato capsized. As the ship rolled, as men scrambled for safety, as the end became inevitable, Itto stood on the bridge, calm and composed. He had tied himself to the compass so he would go down with his ship. And as the water rose around him, he spoke to the officers nearby. "We have done our duty. Tell them we did our duty." Whether that duty was worth 3,000 lives, he did not say. Perhaps he did not know. Perhaps none of them did. They simply made the choice they thought they had to make, and lived, or died, with the consequences. The water closed over Yamato at 2:23 in the afternoon on April 7th, 1945. She took with her 2,498 men, the dreams of Japanese naval supremacy and the last illusions of the officers who sent her to die. What they said when she sank was less important than what they could not say, that they had ordered a disaster, called it strategy, and would spend the rest of their lives wondering if there had been another way. There was not. By April 1945, there were no good choices left. Only degrees of tragedy. Yamato's sinking was simply the degree they chose.